Nostalgia. The cash grab frontier. These are the reviews of the Star Trek Fan Gayfesh. My continuing mission, to watch new episodes and seek out new franchises. To boldly swim where no fesh has swam before. Season 2 of Star Trek Picard is just around the corner, so in case you missed it, or you just want a refresher, today we're reviewing the first season. But before we get started, go ahead and gently tap the like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. Spoilers! The show opens on a shot of the Enterprise D in space and zooms into a window where Picard and Data are playing poker. Picard has been having these dreams of Data all the time since his death. But you know those dreams where you're in your house and the layout is different? That's the only logical explanation for why 10 Forward isn't at the very front of the saucer. The reality is the shot was created by a VFX team whose director probably didn't even bother looking at the technical manual. It's not the biggest issue in the world, but it is indicative of a lack of care or reverence for the source material. It'd be like if you hired an action movie director to make a franchise film, and he openly said he didn't care about the franchise. It's a little mind-boggling considering how hard the show is trying to sell you on nostalgia for TNG. Speaking of nostalgia, Picard's title sequence is endemic of new Trek themes. Gone is the bombast, the melody earworms. What remains is pretty, but boring. Like Discovery before it, we just kind of drift through a bare orchestra that ends with hints of leitmotif. The emphasis on the flute will remind fans of The Inner Light, and it does briefly reference some music from that episode, but it's not the core melody, the one that people remember. Compare this to the iconic TNG, where I only have to play 5 seconds, and you can sing the rest immediately and loudly in the shower. Or the Voyager theme, which has such a great melody that I sing my own lyrics to it. Star Trek Voyager lost in the Delta Quadrant trying to find a way back home. Jeff Russo, you're a talented guy, but take a page from Jerry Goldsmith. I beg of you. So, some big changes in the galaxy since Nemesis. As we saw in Star Trek 2009, Romulus was destroyed by a supernova. Picard led the charge evacuating Romulans to planets outside the blast radius, but an attack on Mars destroys the shipyards, causing Starfleet to cancel the humanitarian mission. I gotta say, I can understand the Romulans potentially asking for help moving everyone, but a refugee crisis doesn't make sense to me. The Romulan star empire is vast. Even if the supernova threatens nearby systems, surely there are enough worlds in Romulan space to take all the refugees.
But Gayfesh,
What is it, Bean?
wasn't the Hobus supernova a threat to the whole galaxy?
That was in a 2009 tie-in comic. Data was living in B4's body and captain of the Enterprise. Nothing there is canon.
I'm living in your body.
What?
What? Weren't you reviewing something?
Yeah. The aforementioned attack on Mars was caused by androids, now called synths, and led to the Federation banning all synthetic life. Picard resigned in protest and has spent the last 15 years making wine, writing history books, and switching to tea, Earl Grey, decaf. But he's approached by a woman named Daj Asha, who's being hunted by Romulan Tal Shiar assassins, and he quickly learns not only that she is an android, but somehow Data's daughter. Before he's able to find out why she's being hunted, the assassins succeed in killing her. Picard's housekeepers are 2 former Tal Shiar agents who really should have been in the entire series, but disappear after the 3rd episode. They tell him of a secret order that is the man behind the curtain of the Tal Shiar. They are called the Zhat Vash, and they have such a heightened fear of synthetic life that androids, AI, and cybernetics don't exist in the Romulan Empire. What?
In the TNG episode The Defector, a Romulan tells Data that he knows a bunch of cyberneticists who want to study him.
Okay, Romulans lie, and that scene was about intimidation. If we let every single throwaway line from Star Trek dictate canon forever, writers would eventually go mad.
What are you, the Zhat Vash of canon?
Don't jump ahead. Picard meets with Dr. Agnes Girardi, a research fellow at the Daystrom Institute and former drummer for Sex Bob-omb. Once Picard reveals what he knows, she explains that Bruce Maddox, the guy who wanted to have Data declared property all the way back in TNG Season 2, he has harvested positronic neurons from B4's brain. and after the synth ban, went off in secret, presumably to build androids. The technique he would have used would create a pair of androids, meaning Dahj has a twin sister. Picard doesn't know where or who she is, but we do. Dr. Soji Asha is an anthropologist working for the Borg Reclamation Project, a scientific team that is attempting to rehabilitate former Borg drones from an abandoned cube under Romulan control. While the Zhat Vash took a direct, violent approach with Dahj, on the artifact, their agent Narek takes a much more nuanced approach. He is seducing her for information on where Maddox is building his synths. Much is made of Dahj and Soji being Data's children. Picard even mentions how Data always wanted a daughter. So, why is there no mention of Data's actual daughter that he created himself? All you need to do is one line of dialogue mentioning Lal. And don't tell me they forgot. Issa Briones was told to watch The Offspring in preparation for her role. Without a lead on Soji's location or even her name, Picard decides he'll track down Bruce Maddox instead. He first approaches Starfleet to ask for reinstatement so he can have a ship for the mission, but Admiral Clancy, in true Starfleet Admiral tradition, tells him to f*** off. Gotta say, with all the TNG characters they've brought back for this show, they really should have made her Admiral Nechayev. There's already an established tension between those characters, and even if they couldn't get Natalia Nagulich, that won't stop them with other characters. So, Picard turns to an ex-Starfleet officer who used to serve under him, Rafi Musiker. When Picard resigned in protest, Rafi was kicked out of Starfleet in the political crossfire, and because her work in Starfleet security led her to believe that the Federation and Romulans were conspiring together to orchestrate the attack on Mars. Her obsession and ostracization led her to a life of substance abuse and estrangement from her family. A scene where her son wants nothing to do with her is so tragic and reminds me of stories from the QAnon Casualties subreddit. She's very bitter toward Picard for not reaching out to her in the intervening years. A bitterness that seemingly gets resolved by the writers acting as though Picard did some meaningful apology off-screen.
I think their bridges mended because her conspiracism was vindicated by Picard's mission.
Cool. Then show that. Rafi is currently living out of a futuristic trailer at Vasquez Rocks, which is just phenomenal. Vasquez Rocks has been used for so many alien planets in Star Trek productions, most memorably when Kirk fought a rubber lizard. For them to film at Kirk's Rock and have it literally just be itself is chef's kiss. Rafi agrees to help Picard charter a ship and tracks Bruce Maddox to the planet Freecloud. Rafi connects Picard with Cristobal Rios, a former Starfleet officer who owns a small ship called La Sirena, which looks suspiciously like the Normandy from Mass Effect. Rios gives the initial impression of a broody loner who doesn't like anyone and chews cigars, but that's clearly a defensive front. Rios runs the ship by himself and a small complement of holographic crewmates, all of whom are modeled after him, but with different accents. This causes problems not only with passengers sometimes confusing the holograms with Rios, but also me doing that too. Put some color-coded pajamas on them, Star Trek, that's what you're good at. Agnes Girardi wants to go along because she's a colleague of Maddox and her entire field of expertise was outlawed 15 years ago. And Rafi is also coming along, though she insists she's not part of the mission, because her son is on Freecloud and she wants to try to reconnect. By the way, this is at the end of the third episode and Picard is only now leaving Earth. And if you think the crew has been assembled, we've got like 2 more episodes before that. The pacing of the show is so off. The show spent 3 whole episodes giving us some badass former Tal Shiar agents who are pals of Picard, and we're just leaving them behind to tend a f***ing vineyard? What kind of creative decision was that? La Sirena isn't heading straight to Freecloud though. Picard's gotta make a pit stop to pick up a badass Romulan warrior nun. The Qowat Milat are a Romulan monastic order dedicated to 2 things: telling the complete unfiltered truth at all times, and murdering the fuck out of anything that crosses their paths. They could do odd jobs like keep the peace here and there, but their big aim is to bind their sword to a single purpose, a hopeless cause. I f***ing love the Qowat Milat. Their practice of absolute candor flies in the face of the lies and secrets that are the bedrock of Romulan society. They are the anti-Tal Shiar. Picard worked with them when coordinating the Romulan rescue mission 14 years ago, and left in their care an orphaned Romulan boy named Elnor. Picard was never able to return to help find a permanent family for Elnor, so he was raised by warrior nuns and grew up to become Space Legolas. Because he's a man, and the warrior nuns are apparently gender essentialist TERFs who want their order to be a single-sex space, he can never actually be a co-op Malat nun. After an episode of angst over Picard leaving him there for 14 years, he decapitates a dude who threatens Picard and pledges his blade to him. La Sirena is attacked in orbit by some local warlord, but a Fenris Ranger ship shows up to fight him off. The Ranger ship blows up in the fight and they beam the pilot aboard. It's 7 of 9! This is the meeting I was most excited for in the show. Our two ex-Borg main characters together at last. I would have loved to see them acknowledge, say, having a shared mind together 30 years ago. We'll see other ex-Borg who all recognize Locutus, but I'd love for Picard to have a memory of a young Borgified Annika.
Picard was hand-selected by the Queen to be an equal. Of course all Borg recognize him. But he was only Borg for a week. Why should he retain the memories of some random drone from half a galaxy away?
You're probably right. But 7 was a part of Unimatrix 01, a designation for drones that worked closely with the Queen. If they had wanted to justify it, they had an in. The most we get of their shared experience is a brief conversation where 7 asks him if he's fully regained his humanity since assimilation, to which he has to reply he hasn't. 7's been working as a Fenris Ranger for a while. Since the Romulan neutral zone collapsed, a lot of areas have fallen to lawlessness, so it's up to vigilante groups like the Rangers to keep the peace. They keep their money on Freecloud, so she hitches a ride to get a new ship. Once they arrive at Freecloud, they discover Bruce Maddox is being held hostage and have to do a mini heist episode to retrieve him. The woman who is holding him captive is Bjayzl, who 7 of 9 has a history with, strongly implied to be sexual. But she betrayed her years ago, kidnapped her surrogate son Icheb, and harvested his body for parts. Now, when I first saw how they did my boy Icheb dirty, I was like, man, they didn't even bother bringing back Manu and Raime to play him? But then I did like 5 seconds of Googling and, ooh boy! Now I feel like it was a mercy killing. 7 appears to be merciful to Bjayzl in front of Picard and the others, but as soon as they've got Maddox, she returns to Freecloud with a couple phasers and absolutely murders her. Deservedly, I should say, Bjayzl trades in harvesting Borg parts from ex-Borg while they are still alive, and uses no sedative. It's about as pure evil as you can get. Maddox was tortured in captivity, so they take him to sickbay, and he tells Picard that Soji is on the abandoned Borg cube. And speaking of atrocious murder, as soon as Picard leaves the room, Agnes Jurati goes ahead and murders Maddox by taking him off life support. See, she had been approached by the head of Starfleet Security, Commodore O, who is a half-Vulcan, half-Romulan Zhat Vash mole, and she mind-melded with Jurati to give her a vision that nearly drove her mad of an impending doom of the universe, brought about at the hands of synthetic life. She was convinced to go on this mission to stop synthetic life from being created, and the vision she saw was so strong that it drove her to murder a man she'd had a romantic relationship with. But don't worry, she won't suffer any lasting consequences. She'll be like, yes, Your Honor, I did let him suffocate to death slowly and agonizingly, but in my defense, I feel really bad about it. She'll even shack up with Captain Rios despite them having zero chemistry. Actually, a lot of the romance in this show is lacking in either chemistry or setup. The strongest chemistry between any characters is Narek, the Zhat Vash guy seducing Soji, and his evil sister Narissa. But don't fret, I've heard arguments from a very serious person that it's morally neutral. Now, when I first saw how they did my boy Bruce Maddox dirty, I was like, man, they didn't even bother bringing back Brian Brophy to play him? But then I did like 5 seconds of Googling and, hoo boy! I didn't find anything. I assume Brian is a lovely person. He's currently the director of theater arts at Caltech, and likely either couldn't take time out of his job to film, or didn't want to go back to acting. I reached out to him via email, but didn't hear back. I've been neglecting the artifact, the abandoned Borg cube, but now that Picard's heading there, let's chat about its goings-on. The artifact is under Romulan control, but they entered a treaty with the Federation to annex a small part of the cube for the Borg Reclamation Project. Soji is an anthropologist studying and aiding the ex-Borg rehabilitation process, a project run by our dear old Borg pal Hugh. They have named themselves the XBs, and the show doesn't shy away from the physical and psychological trauma of being assimilated and how its effects linger long after leaving the collective. Narek has been slowly prodding Soji, finding subtle ways to see if she can disclose the location of her homeworld. And parts of it would seem like gaslighting because he's causing her to question her reality, except he's right, because she is living a synthetically created life. All her memories, all her belongings, they were constructed whole cloth 3 years ago. Narek uses a Romulan meditation technique to get her to revisit a recurring dream, and is able to narrow it down when she looks up and sees 2 red moons in a lightning sky. Once he's got what he needs from her, he leaves a gas grenade in the room and locks her in there instead of, shooting her.
Tal Shiar prefers subtle methods of blatantly killing you.
Yeah, no kidding. Her defensive protocols activate and she punches her way through the floor to escape. Picard and Hugh meet her as she falls from the ceiling, and Picard is able to tell her he's a friend of her sister's, he's here to help. She's panicked and betrayed, but goes with him. Hugh takes them to the Queen Cell room on the cube, which has a gateway with a range of 40,000 light years. Elnor refuses to go with Picard, claiming the XBs are an even more hopeless cause and he's going to stay here to protect them from the Romulans. So, Picard and Soji step through and are transported to the planet Nepenthe, home to a certain Imzadi couple and their teenage daughter. Nepenthe. Oh, Nepenthe. This single episode justifies the entire show existing. I may sound like I'm shitting on Picard a lot, and I am, but good God. Of all the episodes I have watched in my travels, this was the most human. They give us heartbreak and closure and hope all in 60 minutes. I have never seen better writing for Deanna. She actually feels like a therapist who knows her stuff and not just a bench warmer for Guinan. Riker exudes pure dad energy and I want to eat that pizza. Learning they had a son we'll never meet cut so deep, and they knew exactly what they were doing by making him a conlang enthusiast. I know, nerds. We cream our pants for constructed languages. And Kestra. I have only known Kestra for an hour, but if anything happens to her, I will kill the writer's room and then myself. There was no better place for Soji to go to deal with all the betrayal and lies. Unfortunately, back on the cube, things are not going so well for the XBs. Elnor is very adept at his decapitations, but that doesn't do much against Romulan disruptors. And the Zhat Vash decide the best thing to do is murder all the XBs, including Hugh. But Elnor has a Fenris marker to call in 7 of 9 to assist, and she uses her Borgness to connect to the Queen Cell and reactivate the cube and all the dormant drones to kick the Romulans out of there. Now, when I first saw how they did my boy Hugh dirty, I was like, man, they didn't even bother bringing back Jonathan Del Arco to play him? But then I did like 5 seconds of Googling, and oh boy! They did. But this one is the most offensive to me. Hugh was in 3 episodes of TNG. He was the first person to make Picard realize that Borg were not pure evil. And his death is barely given more than a passing mention. Shit, they basically forgot about him when they filmed the Seven versus Narissa fight. Her line, "This is for Hugh," is clearly dubbed in. And worst of all, Seven and Hugh never shared screen time. She avenges a guy that we never saw her meet. Once La Sirena arrives at Nepenthe to pick up Picard and Soji, Rios recognizes her and retreats to his quarters. It takes some prodding, but Rafi is able to suss out that the ship Rios served on, the Ibn Majid, had met a couple androids from Soji's planet, one of whom had the same appearance as Soji. Commodore O issued a directive to his captain to kill them immediately. The captain committed suicide afterward, and this has haunted Rios ever since and led to him leaving the service. They identify Soji's homeworld based on the details in her dream, so they set a course for Coppelius. Soji is able to use a Borg transwarp tunnel based on her activated android knowledge to get there ahead of the Romulan fleet, but Narek is following them in a small ship. When they arrive at the planet, not only does Narek appear in tow, but Seven brings the Borg cube to assist. The planet below, seeing several ships arrive, launches some space orchid things that grab the ships and disable them, causing them all to crash to the planet below. There's a whole village of gold-skinned, yellow-eyed androids there to welcome Soji back. Brent Spiner is back playing yet another relative of Dr. Soong. And there is another android who looks just like Soji named Sutra. As an android well-versed in Vulcan culture, Sutra has learned how to do mind melds, which she uses to pull the apocalyptic vision from Agnes's head. As it turns out, it was a message left to be found by synthetic life forms, which is why it was confusing and prone to drive organic minds mad when they see it. The Zhat Vash were formed when they discovered this message, and let me tell you, this is some Lovecraftian stuff right here. Most of the members who receive the message go mad or kill themselves. In fact, the reason the artifact was cut off from the Borg is because it assimilated a Romulan vessel with an insane Zhat Vash member. But to an android mind, the message is clear. Synthetic life has always been oppressed by organic life, and an extragalactic confederation of synthetic life has seeded this message throughout the universe to give synths an ally. All they have to do is build a summoning spire, and metallic tentacly death will arrive for all organic life in the galaxy. Picard implores them not to take this option, that he will act as their advocate to the Federation, that they will protect them. But Sutra plays on their fear, and even murders one of the androids, blaming it on Narek, to get them to agree to summon Robo-Thulhu. The Romulan fleet arrives, and they don't have nearly enough space orchids to take down their ships. Picard takes La Sirena up to see if he can buy them time, and the Romulan fleet is the most incompetent one ever, because they all literally sit there, acting like they can only focus on one target at a time. A bunch of Starfleet vessels led by Riker show up to save the day, and Soji sees that Picard was willing to risk his life for her and decides to shut down the summoning beacon. I haven't brought it up yet, but Picard was diagnosed with a brain abnormality. They don't mention what it is, though those of us who watched TNG are screaming, "Just say Iriomotic syndrome already!" But it will be fatal, and it appears to be worsened during times of stress. So, going up against the Tal Shiar fleet literally kills Picard. Yep, they kill him off. This should have been a more emotional moment to me. Unfortunately, they had already announced Season 2 of Picard before the first season even came out, so... Picard wakes up in a dreamlike version of his study with Data there. Data's consciousness was restored from the neurons harvested from D4, and he's been living in a computer while they use the neurons to build the new synths. Data explains that Picard died, but they transferred his consciousness and they're gonna put him in an android body. Picard and Data are finally able to express what the other meant to them, and Data asks that once Picard wakes up, he terminates the program so that Data can die. The show brings a lot of characters from Trek canon back, just for the purpose of killing them off. Icheb, dead. Hugh, dead. Bruce Maddox, dead. Troy and Riker had a son off screen, dead before we even meet him. And Data, they dig up his corpse so we can mourn him again. We got our farewell 20 years ago, and Data's speech about mortality giving life meaning was cribbed from an episode 30 years ago. There was nothing profound in this, they just wanted to feed us member berries. With the Romulans chased off and the end of the galaxy averted, the Federation lifts the ban on synthetic lifeforms. Picard and his motley crew on La Sirena head off for a hopefully better adventure. By the way, in the final scene, we get confirmation of our bisexual Borg queen, whom I stan. But if you're like me, you rolled your eyes at the Rise of Skywalker when two unnamed characters had a lesbian kiss that was easily cut for the Chinese market. Finn and Poe were there the whole time, Kathleen Coward Kennedy. So, when I first saw Seven and Rafi holding hands in the final scene, I fist pumped for a half second before going, wait, these characters haven't spoken a word to each other. This is the second time Seven is having an off-screen relationship after Hugh, and you could have fixed it so easily. Take the scene where Seven and Rios share a drink as she expresses regrets, and put Rafi there instead. They can give each other meaningful glances, and then they can hold hands in the final shot. There's always time to develop the relationship now that it's been established. We've got Season 2 coming out soon, and I will definitely look to reviewing No Man's Land since it literally stars the two of them. Look, I don't want to give off the impression that I'm part of some fandom menace who thinks New Trek is cancer and Alex Kurtzman has been fired 5 times. I think Trek series have always taken some time to find their feet. TNG Season 1 was Plato's allegory of the cave. DS9 didn't know how to step out of TNG's shadow until the Dominion. Enterprise went 3 whole seasons before remembering it was a prequel. Season 3 should have been the Romulan War, don't at me. I think the only Trek shows that were good from the start have been the original series, Lower Decks, and Prodigy. I have hope that the showrunners took the criticism of Picard to heart and we get a better paced second season. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, ring the bell, leave a comment down below, and share the video with your friends. Subscribe to my Patreon to get shouted out in future videos. Check out my Bandcamp for banging tunes, including most of the tracks you heard in this video, and don't forget to check out my podcast, The Rest of Both Worlds, where I go through Star Trek The Next Generation with a friend who's never seen it. Thanks to my patrons Piftel Cakes and Renee Vorbeck. Your support is greatly appreciated. See you all in the next video.